Saditam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha Madeka Bando Matsangin Maguro Man Mahadana Man Nistarakamat Bhagya Marananda Namostute Hari Om Tat Sat. Shukadeva Goswami completed his description of the descendants of Kashyapa Muni and Aditi. He began a description of the descendants of Kashyapa Muni and Diti. In the course of that description, he mentioned how Diti had 49 sons called Maruts, who although born of Diti and therefore should be demons, became Devatas. Parikshit Maharaj inquires about this, apparently in a very subtle way. The subtlety of the question indicated that the story that Shukadeva Goswami would tell to divulge the answer to the question has many meanings embedded in it. We discussed some of those meanings yesterday. 3 of them are mentioned by our acharyas. Number 1, that by tamasic bhakti, which means doing bhakti for the purpose of like killing someone, for example, one becomes purified of such murderous intentions or tamasic intentions, and later becomes qualified for the liberated life, even by tamasic bhakti. That's one meaning. Another meaning is that DT, she's finding fault with Indra while herself containing the same fault. Another meaning, Kashyapa Muni, although a greatly learned person and devotee of the Lord, became bewildered by the Lord's Maya in the form of a beautiful woman, his wife. So these are some of the meanings to be derived from the story. So then the story began, and it opens up with DT being infuriated that Indra has killed her sons through the instrument of Vishnu. That's how she's thinking about it. And therefore she wants revenge on Indra. She criticizes Indra for being cruel-hearted, hard-hearted, cruel, and sinful, because just for the purpose of the body, which will turn into stool after 1 or 2 days, one is prepared to do all unlimited simple activities like kill her sons and thus go to hell. That's the same fault that she has, though. For her own body or for her own sense of I and mine, she's prepared to kill someone else. So the same thing she's criticizing Indra for, she herself is having the same fault. We told a story of Ramchandra Puri to demonstrate this sort of problem in a conditioned soul. We zoomed on it because our acharyas told us that was one of the meanings to be derived from the story. So having herself become hard-hearted and cruel and wanting revenge, she begins to please her husband, because by pleasing her husband, then she can have her desire fulfilled, which is to have a son that will kill Indra. So there was a short description of how she showed herself as very devotional to her husband and how her husband became completely captured by her chastity. In the old days when people were pious, then a chaste wife was able to bind the mind of her husband. This was such the standard, it seems, that even Vishnu himself, when speaking to Darvas Muni, compares his devotees to chaste women who serve their husband, and that way bind their husband. So in the same way, Narayana says he himself is bound to his devotees by their devotion. So by her devotion to the husband, she bound Kashyapa Muni, and Kashyapa Muni, of course, became inclined towards her. This is natural. We discussed that yesterday. So being pleased by her behavior, Kashyapa Muni wants to give her a benediction. That's where we left off. So this chapter has 78 verses. Let's say we can finish the rest of this chapter today. It's pretty straightforward. Can do some reading. So this is starting from verse 32. Kashyapa Muni said, "O beautiful woman, O irreproachable lady, since I am very much pleased by your behavior, you may ask me for any benedictions you want. If a husband is pleased, what desires are difficult for his wife to obtain, either in this world or in the next? A husband is the supreme demigod for a woman. So a wife should look at her husband as God, Daivatam. The supreme personality of Godhead, Lord Vasudeva, the husband of the goddess of fortune, is situated in everyone's heart and is worshipped through the various names and forms of the demigods by fruitive workers. So the fruitive workers refer to the karma yogis, or those on the path of karma. So in the rites, they often are worshiping the devatas. The devatas are understood as parts of the universal form of the Supreme Lord. So in that way, they worship only God himself. So in the same way, a wife should understand that her husband is God in the form of her husband. Similarly, a husband represents the Lord as the object of worship for a woman. She should view her husband in this way. Next verse, my dear wife, whose body is so beautiful, your waist being thin, a conscientious wife should be chaste and should abide by the orders of her husband. She should very devoutly worship her husband as a representative of Vasudeva. My dear gentle wife, because you have worshipped me with great devotion, considering me a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I shall reward you by fulfilling your desires, which are unobtainable for an unchaste wife. Okay, so he's pleased with her. Now he wants to fulfill her desire. So Diti replied, "O my husband, O great soul, I have now lost my sons. If you want to give me a benediction, I ask you for an immortal son who can kill Indra. I pray for this because Indra, with the help of Vishnu, has killed my two sons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu." I think our acharyas have much to say on this particular verse. Varado yadime brahma putram indra hanam vrite. So she's saying here, Putram Indrahanam Prane. I'm asking for a son, Putram, who is Indrahanam, who can kill Indra. So the word Indrahanam the word Hanam means to kill, but our acharyas are also saying the word Hanam can also mean go. So one who goes on to become a follower of Indra. So it can be taken in either way, as Indrahanam, one who's killer of Indra, or Indrahanam, one who becomes a follower of Indra. Amrityum Ritaputra Hamina me Gatito Sitao. The second line is saying that the son that she's asking for, Putra Indrahanam Rene, she wants him to be Amrityum. So Amrityum means deathless. And this is a phrase that can also sometimes refer to the devatas who are in certain karma shastras referred to as like deathless. Amara is one of the phrases in shastra that is used to refer to the devatas as Amara, which means those who do not die. Obviously, they have long lives, but they experience death like anyone else in Prakriti. But some phrases given like this, Amar, that you can attain the abode, the celestial realm of the deathless ones. So the word Amrityum, which means deathless, can also mean Devata, basically. So she's saying here, I want an immortal son or a son who is a Devata. So it could be taken in either way. By which the death of her own sons can be avenged. Mutra putraha nena me katitosuto. My two sons were caused to be killed and were made dead by this Indra. So this is why I'm asking for this particular benediction. So yeah, our acharyas had that to say about this particular verse. The next verse. Upon hearing Diti's request, Kashyapa Muni was very much aggrieved. Alas, he lamented, now I face the danger of the impious act of killing Indra. Kashyapa Muni thought, alas, I have now become too attached to material enjoyment. Taking advantage of this, my mind has been attracted by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a woman, my wife. Therefore, I am surely a wretched person who will glide down toward hell. So he condemns himself for becoming illusioned by his wife. This woman, my wife, has adopted a means that follows her nature, and therefore she is not to be blamed. But I am a man, therefore all condemnation upon me. I'm not at all conversant with what is good for me, since I cannot control my senses. So he does not blame the wife for her nature. He's saying this is the nature of women. So obviously this probably won't be well received in our postmodern world, but he's saying that this is the nature of women, and therefore they should not, they cannot be blamed for following their nature. This is a similar argument that Kaliya makes to Krishna, that I have the nature of a snake, and it's very difficult for a person to give up his nature. As I was mentioning yesterday in the Q&A, Krishna also says this in Gita, Sadrisham Jeshute Swasya Pakate. Ganavanapi, even a man of knowledge, Ganavan, even he knows he's not the body, still he cannot give up the actions born of his own nature. Not possible, even for such a person. Then what to speak of others who are not Ganavan, like, let's say Kashyap's wife, Diti. So he's not blaming her for following her nature. This is the nature of a woman. But I know this is the case, so how is it that I've become bewildered? So he's taking full responsibility for this. Next verse, this is an elaboration on the nature of a woman. Again, a verse that probably won't be well received in today's postmodern world. 41, a woman's face is as attractive and beautiful as a blossoming lotus flower during autumn. Her words are very sweet, they give pleasure to the ear. But if we study a woman's heart, we can understand it to be extremely sharp, like the blade of a razor. In these circumstances, who can understand the dealings of a woman? To satisfy their own interests, women deal with man as if the man were most dear to them, but no one is actually dear to them. Women are supposed to be very saintly, but for their own interests, they can kill even their husbands, sons, or brothers, or cause them to be killed by others. So this is the nature of a woman and the estimation of Kashyapa Muni. I suppose a postmodern perspective of this would be that he's just salty, that he can't control his own senses. And although he's taking responsibility, he's like low-key blaming. That would be a sort of postmodern explanation of the verse. I tend to think of a conventional issue. If men are physically stronger, then women would have to have another tactic by which they gain power. Obviously, this is talking about the lower nature of a species. A woman is like a species. A man is also another, a species within the human category. And so when men are in their lower nature, we get plenty of descriptions about that in scripture. So women also in their lower nature like this, but they're not as powerful as men on just a brute level. They're not as powerful. So then they would have to do other tactics in order to gain the power. So you get a sense of how their power plays out. Especially they're very beautiful, they become conniving, sharp heart, and because that's where their power is. And so then they can misuse it also. So he's not blaming per se, but he's, chastising himself for being bewildered by her, even though he knows this is the nature. Okay, next verse. I promise to give her a benediction, and this promise cannot be violated, but Indra does not deserve to be killed. In these circumstances, the solution I have is quite suitable. Okay. So Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, Kashyapa Muni, thinking in this way, became somewhat angry, condemning himself, O Maharaj Parikshit, descendant of Kuru. He spoke to Diti as follows. Okay, so this is his strategy. He offers her a Tamasic Bhakti program, which we already heard about. So my dear, in this way, she will get a son who will become a follower of Indra. And that son will also become Amara, a Devata. So from his thinking, this is the conclusion. When he will speak with her thinking, she will hear husband say, I'll give you a son who will become a killer of Indra, and he will be like immortal. So both parties become satisfied. This example is given in Shastra also, Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto. I'm just now thinking I should have pulled the verse up. But it's describing 11th canto, chapter 11, Krishna is describing the nature of Karma Shastra. So in Karma Shastra, people approach it because they have some selfish desire to be fulfilled. So they do what is called kamya karmas, the karma for fulfilling their own desires. So they approach Shastra for that reason. But Shastra has a purpose of bringing them progressive enlightenment. Vedesha Sarvadar Hameva Vedyo. Krishna says, the purpose of all Vedas is to know him. That is actually the purpose. So Shastra will give all sorts of rituals by which material desires can be fulfilled. That is on the surface level. But internally, some medicine will be there. The medicine that will help them gain faith in Shastra. And with that faith, they can progressively move into deeper meanings of Shastra as they become purified of their material desires. So the example is given like a mother or father who gives like a sweet ball that's having medicine inside. So the child is thinking, yes, I'm getting sweet ball. And the parents thinking, yes, they're eating the medicine. And that way both parties are satisfied. So Kashyapa Muni is taking such an approach also. From her, he will speak. From her perspective, she's getting the sweet ball. From his perspective, she's getting the medicine. And that way everyone is happy. Kashyapa Muni said, my dear gentle wife, if you follow my instructions regarding this vow for at least 1 year, you will surely get a son who will be able to kill Indra or be a follower of Indra from his perspective. However, if you deviate from this vow of following the Vaishnava principles, you will get a son who will be favorable to Indra. So Didi replied, my dear Brahmin, I must accept your advice and follow the vow. Now let me understand what I have to do, what is forbidden and what will not break the vow. Please clearly state all this to me. Kashyapa Muni said, my dear wife, to follow this vow, do not be violent or cause harm to anyone. Our acharyas point out from this very first statement, it prohibits thinking violently about Indra. In the very first statement itself, otherwise the vow will be broken. So in this way, already the program of purification begins. Yes, so never, do not be violent or cause harm to anyone. Do not curse anyone. Do not speak lies. Do not cut your nails and hair. Do not touch impure things like skulls and bones. My dear gentle wife, never enter the water while bathing, never be angry, and do not even speak or associate with wicked people. Never wear clothes that have not been properly washed, and do not put on a garland that has already been worn. Never eat leftover food, never eat prasad offered to the goddess Kali, Durga. And do not eat anything contaminated by flesh or fish. Do not eat anything brought or touched by a Shudra, nor anything seen by a woman in her menstrual period. Do not drink water by joining your palms. After eating, you should not go out to the street without having washed your mouth, hands, and feet. You should not go out in the evening or with your hair loose, nor should you go out unless you are properly decorated with ornaments. You should not leave the house unless you are very grave and are sufficiently covered. You should not lie down without having washed both of your feet or without being purified, nor with wet feet or with your head pointed west or north. You should not lie naked or with other women or during the sunrise or sunset. Putting on washed clothing, being always pure and being adorned with turmeric, sandalwood pulp, and other auspicious items. Before breakfast, one should worship the cows, the brahmanas, the goddess of fortune, and the supreme personality of Godhead. With so many details that you have to follow in a year, that already is like a tactic. With flower garlands, sandalwood pulp, ornaments, and other paraphernalia, a woman following this vow should worship women who have sons and whose husbands are living. The pregnant wife should worship her husband and offer him prayers. She should meditate upon him, thinking that he is situated in her womb. If you perform this ceremony called Pung Savana, adhering to the vow with faith for at least 1 year, you will give birth to a son destined to kill Indra. But if there is any discrepancy in the discharge of this vow, the son will be a friend to Indra. So, O King Parikshit, Diti, the wife of Kashyapa, agreed to undergo the purificatory process known as Pung Savana. Yes, she said, I shall do everything according to your instructions. With great jubilation, she became pregnant, having taken semen from Kashyapa, and faithfully began discharging the vow. Now, so It's very interesting because the whole next chapter, Parshit Maharaj wants to know the details of this Pungsavana rite. So let's see how I might just give a summary of that and we'll move on to the seventh canto. But why Parshit Maharaj is asking for a detailed description of this rite, I don't know. I guess I have to try to study. But you can see every part of the psychophysical life is governed very strictly. Any transgression will lead to the opposite result. So, but she's very happy to try. So what happens next? Okay. So, O king, who are respectful to everyone, Indra understood Diti's purpose, and thus he contrived to fulfill his own interests. Following the logic that self-preservation is the first law of nature, he wanted to break Diti's promise. Thus he engaged himself in the service of Diti, his aunt, who was residing in an ashram. And I guess she couldn't become angry at that because that would break the vow. So she was just being very cordial with him. He's also being very cordial. Oh, there, auntie, let me render some service to you. Indra served his aunt daily by bringing flowers, fruits, roots, and wood for yagyas from the forest. He also brought kusha grass, leaves, sprouts, earth, and water exactly at the proper time. As the hunter of a deer becomes like a deer by covering his body with deer skin and serving the deer, so Indra, although at heart the enemy of the sons of Diti, became outwardly friendly and served Diti in a faithful way. Indra's purpose was to cheat Diti as soon as he could find some fault in the way she discharged the vows of the ritualistic ceremony. However, he wanted to be undetected, and therefore he served her very carefully. O master of the entire world, when Indra could find no faults, he thought, how will there be good fortune for me? Thus he was full of deep anxiety. Having grown weak and thin because of strictly following the principles of the vow, Diti once, unfortunately, neglected to wash her mouth, hands, and feet after eating, and went to sleep during the evening twilight. Finding this fault, Indra, who has all the mystic powers, entered Diti's womb while she was unconscious, being fast asleep. After entering Diti's womb, Indra, with the help of his thunderbolt, cut into 7 pieces her embryo, which appeared like glowing gold. In 7 places, 7 different living beings began crying. Indra told them, do not cry. And then he cut each of them into 7 pieces again. So each of the 7, he cuts into 7 pieces. So 7 and 7 is 49. Sounds brutal. It's practically an attempted abortion, which is condemned in Shastra. In this particular verse, there seems to be differences of opinions with no conclusion about how the jiva enters how there was one jiva in the womb cut into 7 different bodies. So did that one jiva expand into the 7 different bodies? So some are of the opinion that that was the case, that there was one jiva, and like the mystic yogis have ability to expand, so the jiva expanded into those bodies. Sri Vishwanath says this is one opinion. Another opinion is that 49 jivas actually entered into her womb at that time, knowing the future of the result of the future result of the situation. So when the bodies was cut into 7 and then 7 pieces each, then those jivas entered those bodies at that time. Another explanation. Another explanation, it seems that when the body was cut into the pieces, then these new jivas just occupied them as the bodies came up, in the same way that like the example was given a branch. When a branch is cut, apparently a jiva enters. Never heard that. But I think we've seen this with worms also, right? You can like cut a worm into 2 or something, and then both worms are alive. And so some understandings that jiva just entered that body. These different opinions were given in the commentary. No Siddhanta was presented. It was just that some say like this, some say like that, some say like that. It is a great mystery how consciousness works. That is the conclusion we can derive from that, at least. Verse 63, O king, being very much aggrieved, they pleaded to Indra with folded hands, saying, dear Indra, we are the Maruts, your brothers. Why are you trying to kill us? When Indra saw that actually they were his devoted followers, he said to them, If you are all my brothers, you have nothing more to fear from me. Shukadeva Goswami said, my dear king, Parikshit, you were burned by the Brahmastra of Ashwatthama, but when Lord Krishna entered the womb of your mother, you were saved. Similarly, although the one embryo was cut into 49 pieces by the thunderbolt of Indra, they were all saved by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one worships the Supreme Godhead, the original person, even once, he receives the benefit of being promoted to the spiritual world and possessing the same bodily features as Vishnu. Diti worshipped Lord Vishnu for almost 1 year, adhering to a great vow. Because of such strength in spiritual life, the 49 Maruts were born. How then is it wonderful that the Maruts, although born from the womb of Diti, became equal to the demigods by the mercy of the Supreme Lord? So this is like the devotional import. That although it was tamasic, her intention, because she was doing devotion, she received extraordinary secondary results. The main result of bhakti, of course, is bhakti. But there are all sorts of extraordinary secondary results that can come. And this is an example of such an extraordinary secondary result that comes from the performance of bhakti. So the idea is that somehow other bhakti is the meaningful substance in life. And although there may be other discrepancies, as long as bhakti is there, everything is reconciled. Come back to that. We're just going to conclude this chapter. Because of worshiping the Supreme Personality, Diti was completely purified. When she got up from bed, she saw her 49 sons along with Indra. These 49 sons were all brilliant as fire and were in friendship with Indra, and therefore she was very pleased. Therefore, Diti said to Indra, my dear son, I adhere to this difficult vow just to get a son to kill you 12 Adityas. I'm very honest. She becomes so simple and pure. I actually wanted to kill you. I prayed for only one son, but now I see that there are 49. How has this happened? My dear son Indra, if you know, please tell me the truth. Do not try to speak lies. Indra replied, my dear mother, because I was grossly blinded by selfish interests, I lost sight of religion. When I understood that you were observing a great vow in spiritual life, I wanted to find some fault in you. When I found such a fault, I entered your womb and cut the embryo to pieces. Our Acharya is coming here because Diti was very truthful. She just told plainly, I want to kill you. So he also told plainly, I went inside the womb to kill the embryo. And both parties are not having animosity towards each other, despite this sort of divergence. Such is the purificatory power of bhakti. That's what we're supposed to take from that. Although in real time, we may have not seen this play out in the lives of contemporary devotees so much, but you can imagine they're so transformed by doing bhakti. Well, Indra didn't perform bhakti, but even he's transformed by being in her presence, the presence of someone who's performed, powerful bhakti. What is that verse? Akama sarva kama va moksha kama udhariti. Tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham para. So she would be an example of sarva kama, having all the desires. She had a very specific material desire. Tivrena bhakti yogena, but by her pure adherence to bhakti, then she got this amazing result. 49 sons, but even above that, a transformed, antakarna, a transformed heart. First, I cut the child. So he's telling you specifically, first I cut the child in the womb into 7 pieces, which became 7 children. Then I cut each of the children into 7 pieces again. By the grace of the Supreme Lord, however, none of them died. My dear mother, when I saw that all 49 sons were alive, I was certainly struck with wonder. I decided that this was a secondary result of your having regularly executed devotional service and worship of Lord Vishnu. Although those who are interested only in worshiping the Supreme do not desire anything material from the Lord and do not even want liberation, Lord Krishna fulfills all their desires. The ultimate goal of all ambition is to become a servant of the Supreme Lord. If an intelligent man serves the most dear Lord, who gives himself to his devotees, how can he desire material happiness, which is available even in hell? So he mentioned in the previous verse, secondary results of bhakti. In this verse, he said the primary result is darshan of the Lord, where devotion is its own reward. And those who receive that reward, how can they desire material things? They do not, in other words, desire material things. but this is for the intelligent person. Of course, the word in the verse I just quoted, udharati, moksha kama udharadihi. The word udharadihi means a broad-minded person also, or broad intelligence. Udharati. So in other words, even if you are having some material desires, anyway, you should worship the Supreme Lord if you are broad, having broad intelligence. But true intelligence is when one performs bhakti for its own sake. That is the general talking point of Srimad Bhagavatam. But if we don't have that pure intelligence, which is the gift of sadhu sangha, then even if you have all desires, still you should do pure bhakti yoga. And by pure bhakti yoga means you only take shelter of bhakti in order to fulfill desires. So there are so many extraordinary gifts that come from that. Last few verses here. O mother, O best of all women, I am a fool. Kindly excuse me for whatever offenses I have committed. Your 49 sons have been born unhurt because of your devotional service. As an enemy, I cut them to pieces, but because of your great devotional service, they did not die. Shukadeva Goswami continued, Diti was extremely satisfied by Indra's good behavior. Then Indra offered his respects to his aunt with profuse obeisances, and with her permission, he went away to the heavenly planets with his brothers, the Maruts. My dear King Parikshit, I have replied as far as possible to the questions you have asked me, especially in regard to this pure auspicious narration about the Maruts. Now you may inquire further, and I shall explain more. So I don't know why this particular story is being told here, why it gets brought up. What is its particular relationship to the prominent theme of the sixth canto, which is Poshanam? I didn't see so far any illumination from our acharyas on that. So it's a fascinating story. My mind was brought over to how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta conceived of institutions. He kind of saw institutions as a sort of evil. If you read his essay on Putana, but he saw it as a necessary evil. And his main idea was that people enter inside institutions and they take advantage of institutions in order to satisfy material desires. And so often they can become the most gruesome of living entities that even criminals recoil at looking at their activities. And of course, the history of religious people is plenty of evidence that this is certainly the case. So then the question comes, well, why did you start an institution then? And his basic answer was that because by Hari Katha, by centralizing Hari Katha in the institution and Hari Kirtan, then even those who come inside the institution with their material desires and therefore sort of natural predilection towards criminal behavior or transgressions, if made to participate in Hari Katha and Hari Kirtan, especially as performed by, Shuddha Vaishnavas, then they will be purified of those tendencies and will become transformed. And a case point is like Diti, who comes in with a completely murderous intention, is completely transformed by bhakti. So it's important for our institutions like ISKCON, for example, to really embrace the responsibility of making sure that pure Harikatha, Hari Kirtan is going on, performed by Shuddha Vaishnavas. And then the rest of us who definitely have all sorts of criminal intentions hidden in the heart can be purified of that by the association of Harikatha and Hari Kirtan. But if allowed to just float around the institution without adhering to the vow to hear and chant, then we'll become like criminal, or we will remain criminal, I should say, rather, untransformed, and then we'll become another statistic in the history of the world's religions. Another, echo of the ghetto, the grossness of religiosity. Okay, so interesting story. Yeah, earthworm. Very strange. Mukunda says, regarding the mystery of consciousness, isn't it also the case that every cell in the body is alive? So does each cell have a soul? Probably, but we're the prominent soul in this physical body that has, so there seems to be a sort of stratification of souls, even when they're all contained in one body. So how that works, I have no idea. It just remains a mystery. Diti did her vow, Harisham says nicely, yet she still didn't get sons that were unfavorable to Indra, which is what she wanted. I get that she was purified, but how does she have purified sons? Well, that's why we explained that one verse. Putram Indra Hanam Vrine. She desired, first of all, she desired a son, Putram, that later on became 49. And she wanted the son to be Indra Hanam, again, which could mean a killer of Indra or could mean a follower of Indra. So that is why our commentators commented on that. I think it was verse 37 in that particular way. So her desire did get fulfilled in that particular sense. Sri Vishwanath is also quoting that famous verse from 5th canto, chapter 19. Satyam Dishtati. Anyway, what is the verse? I need to commit this verse to memory. It's actually such an important verse because even Mahaprabhu is said to have spoken it and teaching it, for example, Sanatana Goswami. So out of all the verses that get picked out, this is a verse that is quoted and explained quite a bit. What is the verse? 519? It's probably 27. Let's pull it up. It's in my memory. The old age is becoming prominent, but it's, yeah, 519:27 is indeed. Satyam dish artitam artito nirnam naivarto do yapuna artitayata. So it is certainly true that if a human worships the Lord in order to have some material desire fulfilled, he certainly fulfills it. But na eva artado yapuna artitayata. Although he is the bestower of the benedictions, he will not bestow a benediction that will cause you to again ask him for another thing after that desire has been fulfilled. In other words, he is aware that, as we've been describing it, the fulfillment of the desire, like a professed desire, is not the fulfillment of what we really want. So we're in ignorance. We actually don't know what we want, but we know what we desire. So that is the difficulty with us. So the Lord, knowing what we want, although hearing our desire, he'll not give the desire necessarily, but he'll give us what we want, which is basically satisfaction of the heart. And so for those who do his bhajan, although they didn't ask for his feet, he will forcibly give the feet. And then giving the feet, that means the experience of devotion. They get what they want, atma suprasidati, the satisfaction of the heart. And in this way, they make progress. So this is this verse is quoted in the context of deities, worship of Krishna. So she wanted a son. She desired a son to kill Indra, but that's not what she wanted. Basically, she wants a heart that is, freed, satisfied, freed of suffering. So the Lord gave that. So these sort of explanations are coming. Radha Jiva says, just like we have bacteria in us and they have each have a jiva, it is like the earth, which is also living entity and has a ton of insects living on her. Yeah, interesting. Athena has some comment or questions.
Hariba.
Hari.
Just on this note, so in comment to Rajiva, it's interesting because the way I look at, so on this note, so first I had questioned that before because we know that Vishnu is in every atom. So then technically everything is living, right? Like the cup, the glasses, the printer, everything is made up of atoms. So why do we say it doesn't have consciousness? And I remember Kasupra Prabhu said, well, it's because it's the lacking the presence of the jiva. So, but to go back, if you remember, I suppose cultivating this person to bhakti, but kind of in discussion, I've read their book, one of their books, and they do talk about different consciousnesses living inside a person. So there's like a main consciousness, there's like an assistant consciousness, and there's like multiple souls. And it's interesting because our Shastra never talks about that. So I couldn't really comment on it. But they also say, like, if in like deep meditation, those who follow their path, they can literally talk to things. Like they can talk to the wall. They could like the chair has a soul. You know, like the mouse has a soul. Like everything has a soul and a role. And I argued, well, no, a soul, the way we say it, and I'm not sure what the Shastric reference is that there's the 6 symptoms of a soul, like birth, growth, reproduction, maintenance, dwindling, and death. So unless something goes through those 6 symptoms, there is no presence of a soul. So then he asked, well, like there are people who can literally talk to this cup, like, and there's a soul in it. So how do you explain that? And I had said, well, you know, in that story of the 10th canto of the demon going into the cradle bed of like Krishna, right? And so like ghosts and spirits are always looking for like a physical gross body. So that could be an explanation. But I mean, just on this topic, I love to hear your thoughts, because supposedly there's people in their path literally can talk to things, and they're saying everything has a soul. But, you know, I haven't gotten the chance, but to ask this question to this person, but like say you have a chair and then you cut off the arm of the chair, then does like another soul just like come into that arm's chair, similar to how you say like the earthworm, right? When you cut it then it splits, like does a jiva come in right then and there? So this is kind of this interesting concept. But I mean, in summary, they say like we have like multiple souls in us, like multiple consciousnesses. And to Radha Jivas, I think it's I thought that, but I didn't ask this, but I think it's different. It's like, yes, we have bacteria, but it's almost like we're the host, like we're the body. It's not like those bacteria or like a consciousness like that could like control us. Just like your example of Mother Earth, like Mother Earth is the host for us, but Mother Earth has her consciousness. So that's how I interpret it. I'm not sure if that's actually what they mean, but my sense is no, they're like, you can grow the energy of your assistant consciousness who can take your like your gong, you know. So but our shosha doesn't talk about any of this, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
So Bhagavan has 2 types of potencies: conscious potencies and unconscious potencies. I call it Chit Shakti and Achit Shakti. And he is the ground for both types of potencies. The ground means the very source of the existence, not only in terms of being the beginning point from which they emerge, but being the existential foundation by which they can continue to exist moment to moment. In other words, without God as the very ground of being moment to moment, then things would cease to exist. It would be generated one moment and then come out of existence the next moment if God wasn't there as the very ground of their existence. This is basic theology. So saying God is present in every atom is just to speak to himself as the first cause of everything, and that's the existential ground by which things can continue to exist on a moment-to-moment level. And not that because he's the ground of everything, therefore everything is conscious. So he, as a very ground of everything, he's the ground of both the conscious potencies, like the jivas and the Swarup Shakti, and also the unconscious potency, the Achit Shakti, which generates the inanimate world. So I don't think we would be so amenable to the idea that chairs and tables and so on have souls in them and one can talk to them. As far as someone saying that they can literally talk to cups, you know, they might have to be checked out to the psychiatric orientation, or who knows? I mean, I don't know whether it's their metaphysics by which they can come to see that such a thing is possible, but our metaphysics aren't so amenable to that particular idea. And as far as like the whole bacteria thing and the earth example that Radhajivan gives, reality is basically, I've used this word before, you can try to take note of it. Reality is basically, it's a holarchy. A holarchy means a whole, like a circle, you know, a whole that is composed of parts that are themselves wholes on a lower level of being. So there's a holarchy, a whole composed of parts that are themselves wholes on a lower level of being. Mundane image of this is the Russian dolls, where all the Russian dolls, they kind of look the same, but there's one Russian doll that has all the other Russian dolls inside of it. And then when you remove that Russian doll, you'll see another Russian doll. It looks exactly like the original one, but it's smaller. So there's like a holarchy of being, consciousness, and bliss, Satchit Ananda. Krishna, we say, is that whole that encompasses everything. Everything is a part of that whole. And then you have a whole or a part of that whole that is a whole, but on a lower level. And those are like the different avatars. They are also Krishna. They are Vishnu Tattva, but they're not the whole like Krishna is the whole. They don't contain all rases. That's what our explanation is like this. So they're wholes, but kind of on the lower level, so to speak. And then you have Paramatma, who relates to the material world. So he's also a whole, but on a lower level. Then you have the Jivas. They're also wholes on a wholes, but on a lower level. And this way, all of reality is like a holarchy. And all the manifestation of matter, they kind of mimic the holarchy of spirit also. So you have like like a universe, and then you have an earth, and then within the earth you have humans, and within humans you have bacteria, and within bacteria you may have cells. So it seems that nature itself mimics the sort of holarchy of consciousness also. So that might be a sort of fun way I would try to play around with that particular idea, at least in terms of how to visualize that. But yeah, this is how I'm going to try to answer that particular question. Krishna is the ground of being, not only in terms of being the genesis of all existence, but also being the source condition that we need to be grounded on to exist on a moment-to-moment basis. And therefore his presence is all pervading. He's in every atom. That's how we like to say it sometimes. It doesn't mean that everything is conscious. He has two types of potencies, chit and achit. So the achit potency is unconscious, that generates the unconscious objects of this world, etc. That is how we try to explain that. As far as people talking to chairs and so on, I'll have to look at their metaphysics to see how they become amenable to such a possibility. Otherwise, it just sounds funny to me.
If I can make a few follow-ups. So I understand the idea of like God is the basis of the foundation for everything to exist. Without his presence, then nothing would grow or exist. Just like how Paramatma, Garbha Daksha Vishnu is in every universe, and that's how the universe can continue to expand and grow. But I guess I wasn't talking, I guess in my mind, just like the book cover of Self-Realization, there's literally Vishnu in every single atom. And so therefore, that was my question. There's consciousness. Vishnu is consciousness. So hypothetically, shouldn't everything be conscious? But you're not saying that. Are you not saying that Vishnu is in every atom?
Everything is not conscious. There are two types of potencies, consciousness potency and unconscious potency. Chit Shakti and Achit Shakti. That image that you see on the cover of Self-Realization, that image is intended for yogis who are doing the meditation on Vishnu. Otherwise, you cannot actually meditate on an all-pervading entity. That's not possible. So Vishnu is actually all-pervading. So how do you meditate on something like that? So an image of him is given by which the yogis can practice meditation on Vishnu. So, yeah, not exactly literal.
Okay, so Vishnu is not literally in every single atom, like that cover.
You can say he is like literally in every single atom, because if he wasn't present, how could the atom exist? Right? So if something is all pervading, like sky, so therefore in Upanishads, Vishnu is also called as Akash. Akash means sky. So sky is all pervading in the material world, the element. Akash is all pervading. It exists inside of everything and also exists outside of everything simultaneously. So if you say sky is inside the body, that is also true. If you say sky is outside the body, that is also true. So even in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, maybe verse 6, Krishna compares himself to Akasham, existing inside and outside of everything. So to say that he's inside the atom is not incorrect, but he's also outside the atom because he's all pervading. So how we understand is inside of the atom, if he was not present, the atom could not exist whatsoever. So that's why I'm giving an explanation like this. God is the very ground, the existential ground for existence on a moment-to-moment basis. Otherwise, the atom could not exist without his presence. You can say inside. But inside, outside, he's like Akash, he's everywhere. So you want to say he is inside, that is also okay. That is explanation is acceptable. Or does it mean that everything is conscious because he has two types of potencies?
Yeah, it's slightly different. It's just the existence of his energy is the cause for things to exist. But yeah, it's not like he's active in like every single cell and every single atom. And that, as you said, that, in like that picture is just more for meditation purposes, not that it might be like an exact literal meaning. Though I feel like devotees, I mean, even I have, some of you I've talked to have like taken as like, no, Vishnu is literally like the form is like literally in every atom. So yeah, I guess that's confusing. But so on this note though, it's I've always thought if you take Lord Rishabhadev, there was a jiva and the Lord himself. So there was two consciousnesses, two souls that were actually active, like in the body. And I think there were other examples. I'm not sure if like Buddha, because I know I know it's arguable, but many say that he's Bhagavan Avesh. So it was actually like a jiva, and then Bhagavan also imbued within this one body. So then it just makes you question like, oh, there's some merit to the fact that they're saying there's multiple consciousnesses like living inside the body. While our metaphysics don't talk about it,
No, we don't. We're not denying that merit. We say consciousness in bacteria. Why not? We're amenable to that. There's no problem that. That is all great mystery though. So there's Shakti Avesh and there's Bhagavad Avesh. So Buddha, Vyasadeva, they call the Shakti Avesh avatar. They're imbued with some Shakti of Bhagavan and they become elevated as avatar. Then you have Bhagavad Avesh like Rishabdev, where apparently the Supreme Lord is entered into that jiva. And so he becomes identified with Bhagavan himself, basically. Like when he says, what is that particular verse? 556, Priyana Yavan Mayi Vasudeva. That without Priti, then no one can, for Vasudeva, no one can get moksha in the material world. So Rishabdev is saying, without Priti unto me, Vasudeva, because he is Bhagavat Avesh. No, Bhagavan is entered there. But how that is going on, that is a great mystery. We also hear stories of Prahlad Maharaj, like Brahma, Haridas Thakur being Brahma and Prahlad Maharaj simultaneously sometimes. So you hear all sorts of things where it's just like, okay, what can be said more than okay? That is a great mystery.
Okay, I'm going to say, because I've always wondered, with the Panchatattva, right? It's like, oh, it's Shiva and the Ba and Brahma, all of them are like a combination. And you're like, how is that possible? And maybe their Shastra will actually, there's another main book that I have to read that might explain it. But to the whole inanimate, I argue that I'm like, well, it's not showing these 6 symptoms. So there's actually like no presence of a soul. And then his explanation is like, no, things exist on different dimensions. And so literally as part of their path, like as one like elevation, is that you will be able to talk to everything is living, and you will be able
to... anyone can say anything. So we only accept certain pramanas. That is how you get out of argumentation. Otherwise, anyone can argue anything. And if they're a little bit good at logic, then they can make a point that sounds compelling. It is not a difficult thing.
Well,
so
if
we only accept one praman, Srimad Bhagavatam. If Srimad Bhagavatam is not corroborated, then whatever they say we reject. It's very simple. There's a very simple way of engaging. We don't have to say that to them, of course. You say, okay, that's very interesting. Otherwise, in the material world, Chaktayo, what is that verse? God, I'm forgetting the verse. Tachaktayo. Help me out here, Krishna. Vivada, Samvada, Chaktayo, losing it. Anyway, I'm pulling it up now. Someone knows it? 6:4:31. This one. Ya chaktayo vadatam vadinambaya vivada samvada bhubogavanti korvanti chashamhura. The Lord Shakti, tasmai namo ananta gunaya bune. I offer my obeisances unto the great Lord who is endowed with unlimited qualities. By his Shakti, he causes the scholars and theologians to argue with each other while losing their own souls in the course of their arguments, sometimes agreeing, sometimes disagreeing. And this way, and Prabhupada asks this, I like this, that he creates in this world a situation where they're unable to come to a conclusion. So we get out of that by saying we accept Bhagavatam as Pramana. Otherwise, anyone will say anything. Then I have to consider everyone's ideas. So I'm not having so much time for that on my new jiva. Why I should accept that chairs and this, that, and the other thing. What pramanam he is using. What pramana he is using.
I know. It's their pramana is literally this person who's supposedly like an enlightened being.
No. Reject it.
I know.
Why should waste time considering his theories? He himself is just speaking something. Anyone can speak anything.
Yes, that I agree. And I've argued with like this. What's the source? The source matters. It's not. It's just some dude. You don't even know what he's saying.
Yeah. But, so why? So period. The end. Why there should be further discussion.
Right.
We don't even accept Buddha's teachings because he does not quote Apurusheya Shabda. Buddha himself, who we accept as an avatar, we reject his teachings because he does not quote Apurusheya Shabda. Now some guy who no one's heard of before starts saying something about how you can talk to chairs and I'm supposed to consider that seriously. And he quotes no pramana for that, but himself, no, reject it. Why we should waste time discussing his theories?
Yeah, it's a little deeper. It comes from the Buddhist teachings, but yes. But
the Buddha that I just said we reject it because he doesn't quote Apurusheya Shabda.
Apurusheya Shabda, is that just the Vedas?
That is Shastra, that is Vedas. And for us, specifically Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedas, Mahabharata, Puranas, like this. Apurusheya Shabda. All of these are Apurusheya Shabda. Why should waste time with all these people's theories? Then some new fellow will come along with some charisma and he'll say something wild and crazy, get a big following. Then we'll have to, they say this, who cares what they say? Some of you were saying so many things.
Right. I mean, I just like everything's a recipe book and you can tell based on your own experiences. Like even Bhakti and Srimad Bhagavatam, like we should be growing in our, like, there's like the GPS system and there's kind of certain goalposts to like be like, oh yeah, this has happened, because you follow it. Just like if we preach, we're like, you follow it and see what happens, right? Like, and you should get results. To them, they're getting results. Maybe there's some validity to it to a certain extent. I consider it from what I've read.
Someone who does the mushrooms, they get results too. Someone who goes to the shamans, they do medicine. They call it medicine. They take like mushrooms, different things, but they do it in a very particular way. They do it. So it's like a ceremony. There's a whole like science to how they do that. They get some experience also. So Arjuna has asked this question about this thing because Krishna made it very simple. He said, if you reject Shastra Vidhi, basically you're asura. And if you accept Shastra Praman, Tashmat Tastram Pramanam Te Karya Karya Vastuto, then you are accepted as Daiva, having divine assets. Arjuna thought this is a little bit too hard of a division. So he said, what if there are people who worship with faith, but not based on Shastra Praman? What is their position? They're not just like doing this thing and whatever. The other thing, they have some system is there. They have some worship, they have some faith. Are they situated in goodness, passion, ignorance? Of Arjuna's questions coming like this. Krishna goes on to explain. According to their nature, they develop certain sort of faith and they follow that faith. They get some result with that faith also. Just as Krishna says that about Devata worship, I make their faith steady. Tasha, what is that? Tasya achanam shraddham. Anyway, I haven't forgotten the verse. So this is going on in the material world. So,
can I ask, what is our explanation of, for example, everything having energy, like energy being separate from the existence of consciousness and the soul, right?
So we already say there are two types of energies. Chit Shakti, Achit Shakti, I already explained that. That you already know also. Maya Shakti, that is an energy. Jiva Shakti, that is an energy. Swarup Shakti, that is another energy.
But I guess I'm talking about, like, say, I know the room, but it's like, like rocks, there's a certain energy, crystals have
Oh,
a certain, you walk
rock,
into,
rocks, crystals, they're energy, but they're part of Maya Shakti.
so there's different gradations. Like, how you even hear just when you walk into a room, you're like, oh, the energy is so good, or like this place is bad energy, right? Like, and
That means people are experiencing Sattva Guna, Raja Guna, Tama Guna. They're also experiencing their own imprints of things that get triggered. If they come to holy places, maybe there's some sort of, meeting point of matter and spirit. So they're getting a sense of some numinous quality of the, like, let's say a Dham, for example.
okay.
These possibilities are there.
So better said, like walk into a room and there's like, there's like skulls and like, like the
That
Maryland.
is tamasic. So they're experiencing tamasic energy. Like, there's some dark energy here. It's called tamaguna.
But there are things that create that, like a skull, like some things,
Sure.
like there's things
Sure.
that, so that has a certain energy. And then if you come in and there's like plants and there's like crystals and all, and so everything like a natural thing, like
that energy is, again, that's Maya Shakti, and it's 3 features: Sattva, Rajas, Tamas.
okay.
That's what we say.
So
All plants, forests, that is Sattva Guna.
Okay.
City, that is Raja Guna. What is that energy I feel? That is Maya Shakti that you're feeling only. And it's 3 features.
Right. And then Prabhupada had said like certain mountains are alive, right? Like they can move previously.
But to understand the presence of consciousness in something, for that you need Shastra. That is Krishna's own statement in Gita. He says that the soul is achintya. He refers to consciousness as achintya, which means unable to be ascertained without the assistance of Shastra, basically. And that's how Prabhupada chooses to explain that word in his purport. I think it's like 225, it's coming, the word achintya. So that means you would not be able to ascertain the presence of consciousness without the assistance of Shastra. So Shastra will be telling some mountains they have consciousness, so we accept, okay. Otherwise, we'd not be able to tell necessarily with our eyes. Other things are a little bit easier to, see or, corroborate with central corroboration. Like you gave the example of the vikaras that a certain object goes through if there's a presence of consciousness. So that can be corroborated with pratyaksha. So certain things can be corroborated with pratyaksha, but most of the subject matter is achintya. That's why no scientist so far has been able to give any evidence of consciousness existence or non-existence. They just make claims. Oh, it comes from the brain, or it comes from this, that, other. When asked to give any proof, they have nothing to show for it. So they just bluff. Because the topic is itself achintya, is mystery. It's very mysterious. So because of this mystery, people take advantage of that and they come up with all sorts of concoctions, and people are very dumb in Kali Yuga, easily duped. All a person has to be is a little charismatic and they have some experience. So then they think, oh, yay, this is a proper prophet. They follow his prophet, they get what they say is some sort of experience. Okay, Jaya, that is also whatever. But for us, we accept Apurusha Shabda. So if anyone's giving us any ideas that are not corroborated by that, then we don't accept. At least those of us who have qualified by Shraddha and Bhakti, we do not accept if they don't quote Apurusha Shabda. That doesn't mean we have to be jerks about it. Well, we just smile and say, Hare Krishna. Thank you. That's very interesting. Someone came yesterday, I was doing deity worship. This weird dude came. He was about 6'4" or something, tall Russian looking guy. Looked like he did a little bit too many drugs, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I'm worshiping deity. He's very new to the space. He was appreciating. And he kept asking me, do you want to learn a spell for opening your third eye? So first I said no, because I have to go on the altar. I don't have time to learn some mantra or spell for opening the third eye. So I did the deity puja service. Then I'm finishing, I'm wrapping up, close everything down. Then he was there. And I gave him prasadam, everything. Then I was like, okay, is there anything else you like to say before I go upstairs? He was like, yes, would you like to learn a spell to open the third eye? No, I don't want to learn your spell to open the third eye. Why not? It's not mentioned anywhere in Bhagavatam, and that's where my faith is. I'm not wasting time learning some spell to open the third eye. Well, isn't that being like small-minded and judgmental? Yes, absolutely. I already have 4 eyes. So I wish I was as clever as you. You're one of the most clever people I've ever met. They said, well, isn't that small-minded? Absolutely, it is small-minded. I'm a jiva. Jiva means very minute living entity. I cannot be taking in all the world's knowledge. It's an ocean of knowledge, a vast majority of which is mundane and bewildering. I can't just take all of that in. I have to be decisive. So I've already made a decision. Srimad Bhagavatam, my Shraddha is here, and now I'm focused there. That is very intelligent. Otherwise, you take everything and you become a bewildered fellow. And that is what is happening to the world with this social media, digital media. They take too much information, overload, and they all become fools now because of it. In order to really learn anything, you have to digest knowledge takes a while. So that means you got to sit with one topic for a long time to digest it. Now, before digestion is completed, we're putting more inside. There's like the fat people. You see fat people, like I'm talking about obese, which is like, it's a big problem in America. Obesity is a huge problem in America. So a lot of it is just the stool in the body hasn't been released yet. So that's how it just gets piled up. Before it's been released, again, putting more inside, then you become obese. So that's what's happening now in the information age. Everyone's just taking out all the information and becoming like obese. And it's not cute. So you're being small-minded, absolutely. I'm being decisive. I chose here. I'll take this road. You can take some other road.
Thank you. And just it's so funny because I'll just comment on that note. This person does open their third eye to be able to go into a certain type of meditation. So,
Sure.
and so then it sounds like while I've said like you can, we do say you like everything's a recipe book, so you have to determine yourself based on like what you get out of it and your own experiences. So we are saying your experiences are important. However, it must be also tied or go hand in hand with Shastra. It's not like if you can just trust your own experiences. Is experiences tied with
Shastra? You experience so many things. So even when Mahaprabhu experienced ecstasy from chanting Hare Krishna, he had doubt on that. And he took it to his guru. And the guru said, this is very nice. Then he gave some explanation in terms of Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, people are experiencing so many things. That's why I gave example. People take the psychedelics, they get all sorts of experiences. A lot of which makes people amenable to some spiritual path. So once Prabhupada was asked about that, have you tried the LSD? And this question was a trick question, apparently, according to how the devotee tells it. If Prabhupada says no, then how does he know it doesn't work? So many people are getting so many experiences from it. And if he says yes, then he contradicts his own 4 regular principles. So it's meant to be like some sort of trap, apparently. This is how the devotee tells it in Prabhupada memories. So Prabhupada said that, he said, no, I myself have not tried, but all my disciples have given it up. And apparently the person was very satisfied with that answer. Prabhupada passed the test, got out of the trick. So Gel is saying, I sense that the presence of Vishnu in every atom is not being taken literally in this discussion. If you like to take it literally, it's okay. It doesn't have to be taken literally though. Why would that be when he has inconceivable potencies? Yes, so it can be both. That's why I said it is like a sky. So he inside everything, outside everything. That is okay. Both are okay. Krishna is all pervading, and he also is localized. He has small baby form. So Mother Jasoda was not able to bind him. Why she was not able to bind him? Because he is all pervading. And something that is all pervading doesn't have an inside and outside, nothing internal or external. So you can't bind something like sky. How do you bind the sky? It doesn't have any starting point, end point, any inside, outside. How do you bind it? So she was trying to bind Krishna, but she could not do it because he's all pervading. At the same time, he was having ankle bells wrapped around his ankles. So how is that possible? So yes, the reality, it seems, is extremely paradoxical. And Gaudiya Vaishnavas were asked to exist in this sort of paradoxical reality where there can be all sorts of possibilities. Previously, reality was either personal or impersonal. Gaudiya said, actually, it's both. There's no problem there. God is impersonal. He is also personal at the same time. So it's paradoxical. And we're asked to hold these paradoxes in our mind. So if you want to think of it literally as he is present in the atom itself, there is no problem there. You can think in that way also. That thinking, again, is for the meditational purposes. And when
this is my problem when you say that is for meditational purposes.
It is.
As if to say that, you can think that way if you want to, if somehow, I just sense a kind of attitude about this point here that seems to like diminish the reality that Vishnu can and does exist in his four-armed form in every speck of the world or of existence.
That is okay.
What is okay?
What you just said, that is fine. There's no argument there. So everyone wants to pigeonhole the reality in one direction or the other. So
no, I feel like I'm doing the opposite. I'm saying because Krishna is inconceivable.
That is okay. So we're accepting that. He is also all-pervading.
Yeah.
So how do you think about an all-pervading reality? So you're given a form to meditate upon. That's what I'm saying. Okay. The descriptions are given for the meditational purposes. Otherwise, you cannot even think of how Vishnu is existing inside the atom. You cannot even think of an atom, actually. Atom is very small. How do you even think of that? Mm-hmm. So some description is given so you can think about it. There's no problem. Okay. So some description has to be given when you're dealing with an inconceivable reality that is both all-pervading and inside every small atom. Both you cannot think of. Something that is too large or too big, you cannot really conceive of it. So some meditational thing is given, how to meditate like that. Mm-hmm. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna pause here. It's already 9:45. Wow. On that. So I'll see y'all tomorrow. We'll see what we do with this next little section. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Go Pramanandi. Hari Hari Bolo.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.